And welcome to the September 26th Law and Regulation Committee meeting. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order and have the clerk call a roll.
Mayor Haudashelt.
Here.
Councilmember Mendonça.
Here. At this time, I'd like to call Sean Wallentine up to help us lead the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Sean. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. We have the minutes from the prior meeting. Mayor Haudashelt, do you have any corrections or revisions at this time?
No, I wasn't here, so, but I can still make the motion, right?
Yes, sir.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the prior meeting. The June 27th, 2024 Law and Regulation Committee meeting.
We have to open it up for the public comment, right, on this? So I'm going to pause that, open for public comment on the minutes, close public comment, and I will second the mayor's motion.
Sounds like we have consensus to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6.1. This is our state and federal priority legislation update for September 2024. I'll kick it over to Mark Walensky, our government relations administrator, and Rob Becerra, our program manager.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Donza and Mayor Haudashelt. The following report includes an overview of an assortment of legislation with areas of particular focus on public safety, building, planning, housing, homelessness, campaign contributions, and at the federal level, the appropriations process. Joining me for the presentation is Rob Becerra, Public Affairs and Communications Program Manager, and I'll turn the presentation over to Rob at this point.
Thank you, Mark. I will be giving you an update on legislation related to law enforcement, fire service, and building. Some of these bills you have heard before, and as I go through them, you'll understand why we're re-highlighting them. AB 3241 was a bill we highlighted at the beginning of the legislative session as a potential concern, as the bill, as it was initially proposed, would have significantly adjusted the way we could use police canines at our police department. Through the hard work of our trade associations, Cal Chiefs, CPOA, and our lobbying firm, we were happy to report and see the bill move to a support position from the city because it drilled down on requiring post, the Police Officers and Standard Training Office of California, to create a statewide standard for the use of police canines. We supported this in spirit, and it took away a lot of the concerning issues that we initially had. We're highlighting this bill, though, because it did fail to move forward in the final days of the legislative session, but we do believe that we will see the spirit of this legislation, and that is the restrictions placed further down on police canines, likely in the next legislative cycle. Moving on to Proposition 36 and recent developments around Proposition 36. As you're aware, the Council recently adopted a resolution in support of Proposition 36, which will appear on the November ballot. Proposition 36 seeks to increase sentences for property crimes, including offenses related to fentanyl. However, California lawmakers, with the governor's backing, have recently passed a package of retail theft bills aiming at addressing rising retail and vehicle theft, which the governor has signed into law. These new laws are distinct from Proposition 36 and take a more restrained approach, reflecting some of the governor's opposition and other Democratic leaders who believe the issues as laid out in Proposition 36 may be too harsh and historically would not be good for the state, specifically related to the prison population. While law enforcement generally supports the bills that the governor passed, many note that the new laws do not go far enough to unring some of the many negative consequences of Proposition 47. The ballot initiative continues to poll well in the state and will be on the ballot in November. So it would be interesting to see how the state decides to move forward with Proposition 36. Specific to Council's action of supporting Proposition 36, the Public Affairs and Communications team, along with the Government Relations team, are working on some advocacy outreach pieces just to educate why the Council chose to support Proposition 36. Two support bills related to the fire department that went to the governor's office. You'll see here on the next slide. We presented two bills in the AB 1168. Specifically talks about EMS service. Although this bill does not directly impact Roseville, it does direct the city's desire to allow the flexibility for cities or districts to retain their rights for ambulance service. This is something we put on our tracking list and have supported from the beginning, specifically for the flexibility of fire service to retain their EMS rights even through negotiations of other jurisdictions. AB 2225, discovery of pre-hospital emergency medical care. Current law, this is a support position on the bill. I failed to mention, excuse me, no, I did mention, both of these bills have moved to the governor's desk. AB 2225 is a bill that we are currently supporting, and current law protects 14 categories of healthcare professionals that can conduct quality assurance reviews of care without having its content used as evidence in legal proceedings. To date, EMS professionals have not been placed on this list. The city supports this bill because it will provide that increased protection to emergency medical services professionals. Think our firefighters. A critical aspect of improving the quality of care provided by healthcare workers in EMS is the ability to conduct these reviews to determine how care was provided and learn from specific incidents without the fear of civil liability. And the final bill I'll discuss is SB 1510, related to permitting electric vehicle charging. This was a watch bill that we had through the building division, and we're watching this bill because currently existing law requires every city to administratively approve an application to install electric vehicle charging station through an issuance of a building permit. When the work is done, the final review is done by the building department. This bill expresses the intent of the legislature to enact legislation that would reduce state and local permitting barriers for electric charging stations. The city is watching this bill, one, to understand the implications it could have downrange, but the Buildings Division's specific interest in this bill cites that our building inspectors play a critical role in ensuring the safety and reliability of high-voltage electrical installations. And specific to this bill, they want to be aware of and inspect any electrical charging station. So we're going to continue to watch the spirit of this legislation, which will likely be seen again in the next legislative cycle, as this bill also failed in the final days of the legislature. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Rob. The next series of bills relate to housing and homelessness. Senate Bill 37, the Older Adults and Adults with Disabilities Housing Stability Act, which the city supports. And supports this because housing has become, as we know, housing has become unaffordable for many people in California, and older adults and adults with disabilities are among those hit hardest by the affordability crisis. Many of these Californians lived on fixed incomes such as supplemental security income or SSI, which are inadequate to cover rising rents. This bill would provide a rent subsidy targeted to those older adults and adults with disabilities who are homeless or at high risk of experiencing homelessness. This bill has been sent to the governor. Senate Bill 1037, Planning and Zoning Housing Element Enforcement. The city has opposed this bill throughout the course of the legislative session for the fines that could be levied against a local government for being out of compliance with their housing elements. The bill requires that the penalty is automatic without an opportunity to cure. In addition, the bill does not consider whether the city is acting in good faith. Unfortunately, this bill was sent to the governor, and the governor has signed this piece of legislation. With respect to AB 1782, redevelopment successor agencies, the city once again supported this bill throughout the course of the legislative session, as the bill would allow for additional funding that a successor agency could spend from their low and moderate income housing asset fund on homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing. Currently, successor agencies are only allowed to spend up to $250,000 per year on these services. This bill allows the cities that have available funds in this account to provide more funding to help prevent homelessness and offer essential services to the homeless, up to $500,000 on an annual basis. This bill was sent to the governor and recently was signed by the governor. And then the final item that I'd like to report out on is that last week, Governor Newsom signed a comprehensive package of 32 bills related to housing and homelessness. He noted that the focus of the bill package represents a comprehensive effort to streamline housing production and hold local governments accountable to state housing laws. In addition, the governor announced the release of a new program guidance for up to $2.2 billion in funding through Proposition 1 to build permanent supportive housing for veterans and other individuals with mental health and/or substance use disorder challenges who are at risk or are experiencing homelessness. I want to point out that the new housing legislation signed by the governor does the following. It mandates that local plans for housing for extremely vulnerable residents include people experiencing homelessness and other acutely and extremely low-income individuals, increase accountability for local governments to report on housing progress, strengthen enforcement and penalties on local governments by imposing monetary penalties on cities and counties that fail to adopt adequate housing element revisions, and streamline housing production by reducing regulatory barriers, promoting housing near transit, and providing incentives for senior housing, student housing, and accessory dwelling units. The 32 bills that the governor signed last week are contained within the city's list of tracked legislation and will be included in the final list of bills signed or vetoed by the governor and provided to the city council in November. With respect to broadband and divestment, the following are two bills that we've reported to the L&R committee over the course of the legislative session. The first is AB 2708. The city supported this bill as it would add new information and understanding of the statewide broadband network, and for the benefits this would provide to direct future broadband funding to these areas in the state with greatest need and to areas being underserved by service providers. The bill was sent to the governor and unfortunately was vetoed by the governor. With respect to SB 252, the city opposed this bill due to the potential implications the bill would have on Roseville and other municipalities and agencies that participate in the Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS. Many public agencies utilize CalPERS to provide retirement benefits to their employees. The CalPERS board must be fiscally prudent to protect the financial security of their members, and this bill ultimately failed in the legislature. With respect to ethics, campaign contributions, and zoning, the first two bills were reported to the committee during the legislative session, and it's AB 2631, The city supported this bill because the bill would codify the Fair Political Practices Commission ethics training program in statute, thereby making it a permanent program that can be relied on by local officials indefinitely. The bill will ensure that local officials continue to have free and convenient access to a resource that educates officials and staff on important ethics laws that impact their work and decision-making. The bill was sent to the governor and was signed by the governor. Senate Bill 1243, campaign contributions. The Political Reform Act of 1974 prohibits certain contributions of more than $250 to an officer of an agency by any party, participant, or participant's agent in a proceeding while a proceeding involving a license, permit, or other entitlement for use is pending before the agency and for 12 months following the date of a final decision is rendered in the proceeding. This bill would raise the threshold for contributions regulated by provisions to $500, and the bill would extend the period during which an officer may cure a violation to within 30 days of accepting solicitation or directing the contribution. The city has supported this bill. It was sent to the governor, and we're waiting final action by the governor on the bill. And then the final bill in this section is AB 98. This bill hasn't been reported to the committee up to this point because it is a gut and amend bill. The bill would limit or expand logistics use developments and warehouses on existing and rezoned industrial sites within 900 feet of sensitive receptors, including homes, hospitals, schools, and public recreational areas, unless specific standards are met. The city is opposing this gut and amend bill that was introduced the last week of the legislative session after months of private closed-door negotiations by a working group convened by the legislative author that excluded city and county associations and other key stakeholders. While the bill intentions are aimed at addressing air quality-related concerns adjacent to warehouse operations, this problematic gut and amend bill includes stringent requirements that will severely impact the ability of local governments to site based on unique geographic and community characteristics, and stifles economic and workforce development in their communities. Unfortunately, after a great deal of discussion on the floor of both the Assembly and the Senate, the bill passed and was sent to the governor and is awaiting the governor's actions. And then finally, with regard to federal appropriations and earmarks, since the last L&R committee meeting, the House Republican leadership had introduced a continuing resolution to keep the federal government funded until March 2025, but failed to vote on the measure due to staunch opposition to the measure from members of the Republican caucus. This past weekend, congressional leaders announced a deal to avoid a government shutdown when the new fiscal year begins next week. It's important to note that Congress has not passed any of the 12 annual appropriations bills for the fiscal year beginning next Monday. And without action, programs and agencies funded by the appropriation and unable to rely on other funding will be forced to shut down. Under the deal reached this weekend and to be considered by Congress this week, the Continuing Appropriations and Extension Act of 2025 will provide stopgap funding through Friday, December 20th, the scheduled adjournment date for the 118th Congress. Yesterday, the House and Senate passed the stopgap funding bill that prevents the government shutdown, and the President is expected to sign the measure today, thereby preventing a funding lapse on Tuesday and delaying the government shutdown deadline. And then finally, with respect to earmarks, as reported previously to the L&R Committee, 2 general fund departments submitted projects for consideration through the Community Project Funding and Congressionally Directed Spending, or earmark appropriations process. Unfortunately, neither project was included in the final appropriation bills that passed out of the Senate appropriations process. Staff will discuss the interest and potential to resubmit the projects with the departments if the earmark opportunity is included in the next session of Congress. On the government relations staff, in conclusion, the government relations staff remains focused on being actively engaged in monitoring the actions of the appropriations committees as hearings continue over the coming months. At the state level, staff remains active in providing letters to the governor requesting his signature or veto on priority bills that are of particular importance to the city. And I'll note that September 30th is the final day for the governor to take actions on bills. And this concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rob. Mayor Haudashelt, any questions?
Yeah, and Rob, you can get back to me with the answer to this question. With our EMS folks, they spend a considerable amount of time called wall time at hospitals. Has that been addressed, or is it something that is potentially addressed by legislation? You can get back to me, or unless you know the answer right now.
What I can tell you is, I know that it has been an ongoing item that is under continuous conversation. So has wall time been solved? I don't believe so. But are there people in the hospital and in Roseville Fire and at AMR working on solving the issue? Yes. But I can get more specifics to you.
Right. Okay. And then with SB 37, the disabilities, I assume these are disabilities, I'll use the term inartfully, pre-existing conditions. So this isn't, I'm getting older and,
Yes.
so it is a disability that occurred early in a person's life, not later in a person's life.
And there are, yes, and there are those disabilities that are medically recognized and identified. So it's those kinds of disabilities that an individual might have, either mental and or physical disabilities that would impact an individual's life.
And then the last question, the continuing resolution is through March of 2025?
This continuing resolution will only go through December 20th.
And a related question, you'll remember you'll know where I'm going with this. We had a number of projects in, and if they, earlier this year, if they did a continuing resolution that only covered part of a year, we would have to resubmit those projects. Is that what you were referring to at the end?
Yeah, and since so as part of the appropriations process, and this was on the Senate side for the general fund projects that were accepted, they were submitted and accepted by our federal senators, so Senator Butler and Senator Padilla, and the Senate Appropriations Committee, when they went through the appropriations bills and included certain projects in that bill. None of the city's projects that were submitted by the senators were included in that appropriations bills. So now we'll need to go back next year. And once again, it's dependent upon whether or not Congress determines whether or not they're going to accept earmarks next year. Because as you remember, up until 3 years ago, Congress wasn't accepting earmarks. And so, we'll have to see what the 119th Congress decides to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Donza.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question on SB 1510. Is the city in line to get any energy credits on that, since we're having to do that? Has that been a discussion? Is there any incentivization? I'll just go with that.
I will say, I think someone from electric would be better to answer specifically that. Now, is your question, mine was in the space of the building division, and so increased funding for the building division to be able to do those inspections?
I was just wondering, is that all tied together? Is there any support from the federal or state government to get those up and running? Because obviously there's a need, or was that baked into it somehow?
I can let you know that, one, we can get more information, because to Rob's point about, getting going to the electric department, who is working on those, on that infrastructure, but also the Public Works Department, the fleet division is working closely on that as well. So,
okay.
And finances, the finance department is also included in that conversation. So we'll do some some research on that and get back to you with the specific information.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What I can confirm is 1510, there's no intent within there to provide additional funding to localities to be able to do those inspections quicker.
Thank you.
So that's, I think that was a little more specific to your question, but Mark's point
Thank you.
is very, very valid as well.
That's good. Thank you.
Chair, if I might, because it's fascinating. So, I think of, by living spaces, there's a number of Tesla chargers, and I believe that's a private venture there. Don't know the business relationship. But when we go to inspect those, I assume we go to inspect those,
We do.
we charge and we are reimbursed for inspecting those, or we are not? Maybe Electric can answer this.
Yeah, I would say, I think I can make an educated guess on the answer.
Yeah.
But I don't think I will. So we can,
that's
let's
totally
let somebody from
appropriate.
Electric answer that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry to, I should do this offline, but we might as well, we've got a couple
We're
of
here.
students here, so.
Let's do it.
Let's get in, let's lift up the hood of the EV and,
I can add to that, is we know that when a request is made to the building department for an inspection, there is a fee that is charged for that. And so I would anticipate, even though it's a Tesla is the installer, that I would anticipate that when the request is made for the inspections, that they are charged similarly as a resident or another commercial entity would be for that inspection.
thanks very much. Mr. Chairman.
Okay. At this time, I'll open it up for public comments. Seeing none, I'll close public comments. And we'll move on to item 6.2, an update from our electric department. I just want to make a quick correction. I have an apology. Sean Bigley, I apologize for introducing you wrong at the pledge. I had the other Sean on my mind because a message popped up on my Facebook right as I was doing the introduction. It's his birthday tomorrow, and my brain just didn't shift gears.
Well,
So-
Mr. Chairman, I have to say, I so appreciate, because, I'm advancing in age, and I thought maybe I would need to make an appointment with,
It's these kinds of mistakes that are not going to get us the high ratings in this time slot. We brought you along in hopes to raise those, but my mistake is going to draw us back, unfortunately.
Chris Romero here now.
Yes,
Good
sir,
morning.
you got it.
We'll kick it over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, Chairman Donza, Mayor Haudeshelt. Seems like we blink our eye and we're already in the last quarter of the year. But my presentation today is going to focus on a recent tour Electric had on the Utility Exploration Center. We're going to provide an update on our DEBA grant, followed by some key energy legislation, and then we'll conclude with a trailer bill from the California Energy Commission ERPA surcharge. So last month, we had a tour of our Utility Exploration Center. It was part of an event with NCPA's annual legislative staff tour. There were about 25 legislative staffers who attended, both from the state and federal side. We focused on our benefits to our one-of-a-kind UEC center that it provides to our community, to our education centers, and the value of a community-owned utility. Out of this event, we also received a recent request from Assemblyman Joe Patterson. They would like a tour of our center, and we plan to conduct that in October. We expect to continue to do these tours with our unique center, and also we're looking into regulatory benefits of the UEC related to energy efficiency savings that we have and creating positive results for the community. So again, this is a tremendous value. We appreciate the support of the city for this Utility Exploration Center, not only to the benefit our local, but also the region and our state and federal representatives who have an interest in energy efficiency and water activities as well. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is the DEBA grant. August 14th, the California Energy Commission unanimously approved Roseville's DEBA grant proposal. Roseville was selected number one in the applicant pool this year, receiving up to $1.37 million in funds. This grant supports efficiency upgrades to the Department of Water Resources units located at our Roseville Energy Park. The DEBA board approval is a step closer towards Roseville owning these units in the future. And this is a $100 million asset, so we're very proud to have an opportunity to take ownership of this in the near future.
Chris, for those in the audience, DEBA stands for Department?
Distributed Electricity Backup Assets.
Thank you.
And this program was created after 2021 when the governor made a proclamation, emergency proclamation, to have more clean energy built in response to some of the blackouts we had in years prior.
All right, you can do it one more time. Distributed,
Distributed Electricity Backup Assets. So, our first legislative bill, AB 1465. This bill has to do with penalties for violations on air emissions from Title V facilities, which the REP, Roseville Energy Park, is a Title V facility. This bill would triple the fines for emission violations. In reviewing the code, most of these penalties with this legislation are for negligent violations. The good thing is that Roseville has an excellent working relationship with our local Placer Air District in related to our power plant. One side note is that this bill was originally applied to only oil refineries. However, at the last minute, bill language was added to add other sources to the bill, with natural gas power plants being one of those. Our next bill, AB 2037, related to electric vehicle chargers. Now, we just had a discussion about permitting chargers. This is another aspect of the chargers. It would authorize a county sealer to test and verify the accuracy of these municipally owned EV chargers. In the past, county sealers, their primary role was monitoring gas stations to make sure customers get the proper amount of gas from those from that equipment. Now, this has been added to their plan as far as monitoring EV chargers to make sure the right wattage is coming across, so our customers are getting what they pay for. If a EV charger needs to be repaired or corrected, it must be completed within 30 days. The bill would authorize the County Board of Supervisors to charge an annual registration fee. POUs would, however, have the ability to do the inspections themselves if they don't want to have the county do these inspections, and there are certain conditions that would be required for that. So this bill passed with huge support, passing unanimously 76-0 by the legislature. So.
And POUs are publicly owned utilities.
Then, Mr. Chair, if I
Please.
could just, so Pioneer, is that a publicly owned utility?
To my knowledge, that might be, I think, a CCA.
Okay, yeah, a
Community aggregator,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you.
So you're welcome. Our next bill, AB 3179, this would exempt emergency telecommunication vehicles from the Advanced Clean Fleet regulations through the year 2030. Certain vehicles exempt include a bucket truck and a cells on wheels unit. Please don't ask me what that is, but I can get an answer to you. This legislation applies to vehicles owned or purchased by emergency telecommunications providers required to participate in the Federal Emergency Alert System to provide access to 911 emergency services or to provide wireless connectivity during service outages. This bill highlights the need for exemptions for vehicles that are used to restore power outages like we do here in Roseville. Although it's a narrow exemption for the telecommunications industry, we still appreciate other industries pushing back on the Advanced Clean Fleet rule that was passed by CARB because it would give utilities more flexibility in the future in meeting the Advanced Clean Fleet rule. Our next legislation is AB 3264. The author of this bill is the chair of the Energy Committee, Petrie Norris, who has been focused on electric rates this legislative session. With rising electric costs and impacts to customers, this is a study bill to determine how to get a handle on the rising electricity rates. The legislature really hasn't focused on affordability. They've been focused on mandates and clean energy goals. Well, it's catching up to everybody now with rising electric rates. The good thing is that because POUs do such an excellent job at maintaining electric rates as compared to IOUs, investor-owns, like the PG&Es and the Southern Cal Edisons, again, this bill does not apply to us. This bill would develop a framework to assess and track total energy costs paid by residential households in California. And we will monitor this legislation and similar legislation in the near future, as we believe affordability is going to remain a big issue for the next several years. Senate Bill 867. This bill was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor in July. It places a $10 billion bond on the November ballot, providing funding for climate-resilient projects. Some of the funding earmarked in this bond is $3.8 billion for safe drinking water, recycled water, stored groundwater, flood control. We know that EU has been monitoring this bond as well and have an interest in it as well. For $1.5 billion on wildfire protection. There's $850 million for clean energy projects, including offshore wind. That's really a drop in the bucket, considering the state this year said they would need $30 billion with a B for offshore wind. Both EU and electric will continue to monitor and track this proposition that's coming on the November ballot as Proposition 4. Our next bill, Senate Bill 1003, a wildfire bill. Currently, POUs submit wildfire mitigation plans every year by July 1 to the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. This bill would change the annual reporting from once a year to at least once every 4 years, as determined by the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. It would have went into effect January 1st, 2026. These changes, typically changes to our wildfire mitigation plans, are minimal, and this new timeline would have been more workable for utilities. Although the bill failed to get to the governor, we're hopeful it may resurface during next year's legislative session. Senate Bill 1251, the mosquito abatement bill. This bill is focused on inspections and electrical vaults for mosquitoes. Vector control agencies, county, and health inspectors monitor areas that are prone to mosquito infestations. And apparently now, electrical vaults are part of those mosquito infestations. It's our understanding that PG&E was not being very helpful to the mosquito abatement inspectors, and now legislation requires a formal vector agreement if voluntary agreement and talks break down. Staff worked with NCPA this year to limit where they could inspect. Roseville would need to provide locations of the vaults if we get into a formal agreement, but our utility data must be kept confidential based on the legislative language. As I just stated, historically, Roseville has not received inspection requests in the past, and we do not see this legislation as an issue. And then lastly, the California Energy Commission surcharge. This was a trailer bill. We had an oppose unless amended position earlier on in the year. Fortunately, this bill did not pass. What's happening is the CEC collects a surcharge from utilities. Utilities put that on their electric bill and collect that surcharge from their customers. According to the CEC, the funds have been dwindling down the last few years, and they project that this program could be insolvent within the next couple years. The CEC is looking for creative ways to increase the ERPA surcharge to fund their programs. So again, a trailer bill was introduced. It would impact solar customers. It'd be a charge based on kilowatt hours. This would create challenges for utilities, existing billing systems, with some of the creative billing that would need to be done according to the trailer bill that failed. We do need to work with the CEC, and we are, to fix the mechanics of this bill And we're very opposed to any additional charge to solar customers to Roseville. So again, we'll continue to work with our trade associations and gather support as we attempt to get language that would support our customers and support, again, the billing system we have and then make sure it's compatible. So with that, that ends my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Mayor Haudashelt?
Chris answered all my questions.
I just have one question on AB 3179. I know in your presentation you called out the cell vehicle, which I won't ask about, and then the bucket truck. So is this bill specific to just utility vehicles that would be expected to respond to an incident like that, or can this bill, or the vehicles covered under this bill, be expanded to what would be reasonably, assumed to respond, like some of our, F-250s or our larger trucks that aren't buckets, or like an emergency vehicle like fire that would possibly respond to like a transformer or a line down kind of a thing.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, last year when this rule passed, we worked with Assemblyman Garcia. I believe the bill was AB 1594, and our trade associations worked with all the POUs, and we had that bill passed, which helped provide some exemption rules for the advanced clean fleet. Now, this particular bill is specifically for the telecommunication companies. So again, it's very narrow, but again, it's promising because we've got utilities, we've got telecommunication companies, and as we get other utilities or industries that are impacted to put up a pushback against this stringent rule that would have a lot of cost to utilities and other agencies. So again, it's very narrow to telecommunications.
Okay.
So hope that answers your question.
I was thinking when they said telecommunications, because some of the same equipment is used for utility and communications, that
Sure.
we might be able to kind of get into that space. But
Sure.
So it is specific to just
Yes.
this particular bill is. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to item 6.3, and we'll have an update from our Environmental Utilities Department.
Great. Good morning, Chairman Donza and Mayor Haudashelt.
Morning.
This morning, I will be presenting several bills that made it out of the legislature and are awaiting action by Governor Newsom, followed by a measure that failed passage that we were actually opposing. Then I will close this presentation with an update on several activities that EU has participated in over the past couple of months. The first measure this morning that I will be covering is SB 366, which was sponsored by the California Municipal Utilities Association. SB 366 by Senator Caballero makes several updates to the required contents of the California Water Plan. The Department of Water Resources is required to develop the California Water Plan and update it every 5 years. The plan is a comprehensive strategic plan for the sustainable and equitable management of California's water resources. This bill requires DWR to set an interim water supply planning target of achieving 9 million acre-feet of additional water capacity by 2040. As part of the 2033 update, DWR would be required to include updated water supply planning targets with a 50-year planning horizon to ensure the future water needs of the state are met. Why is this important? California's water infrastructure and its conveyance system was developed and is operated based on 20th century hydrology. This means California needs to revisit how it operates its water supply facilities and how it plans to meet the water supply needs of the state, including the development of new water resources. To date, the state's response has been overly reliant upon water conservation efforts of everyday Californians. Roseville supported this measure in an effort to develop a balanced approach to meet the state's water needs into the future. The next bill is SB 707, which is one of the extended producer responsibility bills that we have supported this year. SB 707 is sponsored by the California Product Stewardship Council, of which Roseville is a member of. SB 707 creates a first-of-its-kind EPR program for textiles to help combat the 1.2 million tons of textiles that are disposed of in California each year. EPR programs shift the costs for the proper disposal of products onto the producers of the products versus being borne by municipalities and our ratepayers. CPSC has been working with major textile retailers over the last 2 years to ensure the bill is workable and to address the textile industry's concerns. The City of Roseville's adopted Council Resolution 10278 that supports the creation of EPR programs. In alignment with this resolution, Roseville supported this measure and is urging the governor to sign it into law. The next measure that I'll cover this morning is SB 937, which at the last LNR committee meeting, we shared that the water and wastewater associations had moved to a neutral position. However, it was amended in the last few days of session, which pushed us to take an opposed position. In the beginning of the year, Roseville had an oppose unless amended position on the bill. EU worked through our statewide trade associations to remove provisions related to the connection and capacity charges. Those amendments were accepted, and EU, along with our trade associations, moved to a neutral position. However, on August 22nd, the author accepted amendments that added back in utility connection fees and capacity charges, making them subject to the provisions of the bill. The new language could be interpreted to create a new legal standard for imposing these types of fees. When our associations approached the author in the waning days of session requesting amendments to fix this issue, the author declined. In addition to the concerns raised by Roseville Utilities, this measure also restricts Roseville's ability to collect impact fees from developers that the city uses to mitigate the impacts of new developments upon our current residents. As a result, Roseville joined the coalition in opposition and urged the legislature to vote against this measure. Unfortunately, SB 937 was passed by the legislature. EU and working in coordination with Mark, submitted a veto request to the governor's office on this measure. The last measure I will cover this morning is SB 1255 that we opposed, and I'm happy to report it failed passage in the legislature. You may recall that this measure was a gut and amend after it passed out of the Senate. For a little over a decade, our advocates have sought to create a rate assistance program for water customers. Historically, they proposed that local agencies collect the funding and send it to the state to distribute. That, from staff's view, was a violation of Proposition 218. And more recently, in 2022, the legislature passed SB 222 that created a statewide rate assistance program, but was ultimately vetoed by the governor because there was no funding attached to implement the program. This year, the sponsors took a different approach. They proposed local agencies collect the funds and distribute them locally. This was done in an attempt to address the issues of Prop 218 and 26. However, the devils really were in the details. The sponsors used the community choice aggregation model for an opt-out, which is something that staff felt was disingenuous and would cause irreparable harm to the trust we have built with our customers. The bill was heard in 2 policy committees and was ultimately held in the Appropriations Committee. The authors and sponsors plan to bring this bill back next year, so staff is participating in a group that is working to introduce an alternative through one of our statewide trade associations. Staff will keep this committee apprised of the developments over the next year. Next, I would like to share some of EU's community activities that we have engaged in over the past couple of months. The first is on July 31st. Roseville hosted the Regions 3 and 4 Aqua Regions 3 and 4, joint program called Guardians of the Source, Strengthening Watershed Reliance for Future Generations. We had about 75 individuals from throughout California participate in this event. As Roseville and our Sacramento regional partners continue to develop the Sacramento Water Bank, it is important for us to continue to grow support for its future success. So I had worked with Aqua's Regions 3 and 4 to develop the program to showcase how we are cooperatively managing our resources today and our plans to build on our current successes and the integral role our ASR program will play in the future water bank. The next is we participate in the Sun City Roseville Government Relations Committee. So over the past year, I have been keeping them, I kept them apprised of the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulatory proceedings. As a result, the Garden Club reached out to EU seeking a presentation on the regulation and how Roseville plans to meet the requirements of this new regulation. Justin Black, our water conservation specialist, provided the Garden Club with a very well-received presentation. And actually, next month, EU will be the presenter at the Sun City Government Relations Committee providing a similar presentation. And finally, last week, Sarah, Sean, and I were able to attend a tour along with other Water Forum participants of the current habitat rehabilitation project along the Lower American River at River Bend, which is in Rancho Cordova. This project will place about 6,800 cubic yards of clean gravel into the river to provide about 5 acres of spawning habitat for adult salmon and steelhead to create redds. Redds are what I call the beds that the fish use to lay their eggs in. At this location, they are also cleaning out a side channel and also placing in woody habitat back into the water that the fish actually love and thrive in. So, these habitat projects are vital to helping to maintain the ecosystems of the Lower American River and to also help to mitigate the impacts of those of us that are pulling water off of the river and out of the dams for municipal, industrial, and agricultural uses. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Noel. Mayor Hausholt?
Yeah, Noel, I may have missed this. 366, is that on the governor's desk? Was that, I was looking at the bottom of the slide, not at the top of the slide. So is 366 on the governor's desk awaiting his signature?
Yes.
Okay. 707, is that the PFOS?
No.
Different Producer Responsibility Act?
Different. This deals with textiles. So think of your clothes that you're wearing,
Right, that may
shoes, bags, all of that.
It may have PFOS and PFOS in it. That's maybe why
It
I
may.
incorrectly
Yes.
concluded that.
Yes, that's.
And then
We're working on a different aspect of the PFAS and
Okay.
PFOA by preventing it from being added into those materials.
And then, recently at work, we had a presentation on how the use of humor can help with difficult and complicated issues. So I noticed the Aqua presentation was called Guardians of the Source. Is that a reference to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? That was directly for Sean.
And I didn't come up with a title.
You don't have to answer. This was strictly a rhetorical question, okay?
Perfect. I will
And
end
for
it there.
For Sean's, Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. I had a question on 707 as well, but you answered it for me, so I don't have any further questions.
Okay.
I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you, Noel. I will kick it back over to Mark with some final updates.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Mendoza. So the October L&R committee meeting, since the legislature is out of session now, the October L&R meeting is being canceled. And then due to the Thanksgiving holiday, the November LNR meeting is canceled. However, the Government Relations team will be doing a presentation to the full City Council at the November 20th City Council meeting on sign and veto actions taken by the governor.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Any updates from our city attorney's office? Nope. All right. Mayor Haudashelt, final comments?
Nothing, I think I've said enough.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we stand adjourned. Thank you.